Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Totalbiscuit. I fear that in the justified kerfuffle surrounding Arkham Knight's terrible PC port, something a little bit more sinister might slip under the radar. Not if I can help it. The latest release from Koei Tecmo Games Co. Limited arrived on Steam, called Toukiden Kiwami, which is a Monster Hunter style game where you hunt demons essentially and craft gear and all that kind of thing. Sounds good, right? No. Not really, because it's a Koei Tecmo port. This company is responsible for some of the worst ports to PC over the last year that I've ever seen. And in fact, game after game after game has come out in a poor state and really hasn't got that much attention. It's probably because some of the stuff they're porting is quite niche, or because the games that Koei Tecmo come out with have a very specific and in many ways rabid fan base. Dynasty Warriors, for instance, is a prime example. You've got people that will buy the same game over and over and over and over again, and they will ignore things like 30 FPS lock and all sorts of controller problems and things like that. But let me be clear, these guys are some of the laziest when it comes to porting to PC, and nothing they've brought out on PC has been without problems. Why don't we start with Dynasty Warriors? Yeah, they released Dynasty Warriors 8 Empires and Dynasty Warriors 8 Extreme Legends Complete. So, complete, by complete we mean missing the multiplayer, and also missing half of the visual effects that the PlayStation 4 version had. So you've got this weird mishmash hybrid between the PlayStation 3 and the PlayStation 4. It does not look good. Regardless of this fact, this game was defended and has thousands of positive reviews. Well, that's Dynasty Warriors fans for you. We'll defend pretty much anything, unfortunately. And of course it doesn't end there, because Tecmo Koei is also responsible for the Dead or Alive 5 Last Round port. You remember the one that they released for $40 and didn't have online multiplayer on launch, and also looked like it was running on a PlayStation 3? That one? Yes. Incidentally, that was released in March. It is now the end of June, and they are currently beta testing the online multiplayer. As I suspected would happen when I did my video on it when it first came out, the player base for this game is essentially dead, with a 30-day average of 106 concurrent players. With the player base being as low as it is, once online multiplayer does come into play, unless this game has a big sale and a huge second push, I doubt you're going to be seeing a healthy online community for it anyway, meaning the game is basically dead on arrival. What else have they done? Well, they were also responsible for the port of Bladestorm Nightmare. And it is a bloody nightmare, with many people reporting huge performance problems and frequent crashes despite having more than they should need to run this thing. Bear in mind, of course, Bladestorm Nightmare was a PlayStation 3 game originally, ported to PlayStation 4 with a new campaign, given a little bit of a coat of paint, and it runs poorly on PlayStation 4, not to mention running poorly on PC. This game is a mess, and it most assuredly is not acceptable for the price tag that they are asking for it. What else did they port? Well, last night we got the wonderful Nobunaga's Ambition, without an English translation. Yeah, great. Not the only one they did either. They released one back in last year, another version of Nobunaga's Ambition, in Chinese, not in English. So no translation available for that either. Now we come to Toukiden Kiwami. The game certainly has some minor-ish problems. If you wish to run it on a 16x10 monitor, good luck, because it doesn't support 16x10 resolutions, so I certainly hope that you enjoy the letterboxing. If you want to run it over 1080p, you won't be able to do that either, because apparently that does not exist in the world of Koei Tecmo. If you wish to navigate the menus with a mouse, I wouldn't recommend it, because the last time I clicked the mouse, even though there wasn't a cursor, the game actually froze, so that was wonderful. And you have to navigate it with the keyboard. Of course, you'll be given Xbox 360 button prompts while you're doing so. So, that B key, that's actually backspace. But, you don't need to worry about that. Hell, even at the start of the game, you're asked to press any key to continue, and by any key it means one key, that being enter, because every other key doesn't actually work. But these are relatively minor issues compared to the elephant in the room. I hoped against hope with this one. It looked like a pretty interesting game. We don't have Monster Hunter on PC, so it would have been nice to play something fairly similar, and just running it at 60 and maybe giving it reasonable controls probably would have been enough for me. I could have maybe overlooked the fact that it looks like it's 5 years old. I could have overlooked poor options menus and things like that, although I would have certainly mentioned them. This is for my own personal enjoyment, not for actual critical recommendation. But here's the thing, they didn't even manage that. You see, Token Kiwami is locked at 30 frames per second. Because of course it is. I mean, what else would you do with a fast-paced action game other than lock it at a frame rate so old that even the Super Nintendo didn't find it acceptable? Yep, they did that. But it gets a little bit worse than that, I am afraid. You see, remember when I did a video on Need for Speed Rivals? When I commented and showed that if you unlock the frame rate using a fix to the .ini file, the game's physics engine completely breaks and the game runs at twice its normal speed, making it completely unplayable? Token Kiwami is even worse. So by default, it is locked to 30 frames per second, but here's what I found. If you run this with G-Sync, and maybe this is the case with FreeSync as well, I don't have a FreeSync monitor to actually test it on. If you run this with G-Sync enabled, it unlocks the frame rate. What happens when you unlock the frame rate? This. Yep, you guessed it, the frame rate is tied to the physics and the animation of the game, meaning that any frame rate higher than 30 will make the game unplayable. This is at 120 frames per second. The game is running at 4 times its normal speed. Every now and again it'll drop down to 60, which will mean that it's only running at 2 times its normal speed. Totally playable, right? No, absolutely not. It is a farce. It's ridiculous that games still come out in this day and age that are tied to frame rate like this. And unfortunately, quite a lot of Japanese developers do this. It's reasonably uncommon for Western developers, although as we've seen with Need for Speed Rivals, it is not entirely outside the realms of possibility that will happen. But with some Japanese developers, this happens a great deal. And you know the weird thing about this is I didn't even mess with it. This is what happened when I loaded the game up for the first time. Did I mess with an INI file? Did I load a hack for the frame rate? No. No. I just had the audacity of owning a G-Sync monitor. Turning off G-Sync will lock the game to 30 frames per second. Glorious cinematic 30 frames per second. Yeah. How wonderful that is. Not that, of course, that it mentions this anywhere on the Steam page. As far as I'm concerned, if you're going to lock your game to 30, the least you can do, is mention it in big orange letters on your Steam page. Do they do that? Of course not. And that's not the only problem. The recent update to the game, which supposedly fixed some issues with the game freezing during battle results screens, also caused the frame rate to drop hard in town. This is thankfully not the sort of thing that I'm experiencing because it turns out a $5,000 PC can probably run the game a little bit better than a frickin' Vita can, but lots of people are reporting huge frame drops in hub areas after the latest patch. Now bear in mind, as far as I'm aware, this did not fix a crippling problem that the game has. If you happen to be running a GTX 980, a GTX 560, or a GTX 570 with Windows 8.1, the game will crash. Why? Nobody knows, but they recommend that you either get another graphics card or you use Windows 7 compatibility mode. It's very surprising to me that you could break a game on the latest hardware, but this is Koei Tecmo we're talking about, so I guess I shouldn't be too shocked. Onto the pile of problems that this port has, we can add the fact that keyboard control essentially is unplayable, as much as you might wish to be able to. In order to manipulate the camera, you have to use the cursor keys, meaning you have to take your hands off the attack buttons, which is not exactly ideal for a Monster Hunter style game, is it? You need a controller for this, preferably a 360 controller, because those are what the button prompts and tutorial prompts will tell you. There is a difference, I think, between a game running better with a controller and a game being unplayable without one. And if a game is unplayable without one, as I do genuinely believe that Token Kiwami is, despite the fact that it claims that you can use the keyboard, then that should be very, very prominently noted on the Steam page. Is it? No. No sign of that anywhere on the Steam page at all, I'm afraid. Now, of course, just to add insult to injury, this game looks like it came from a PlayStation Vita. It is blurry, muddy, it's like you've got Vaseline all over your screen. The texture quality is absolutely abysmal. And this is running on the highest possible settings that the game allows for. This looks like it comes from a PlayStation Vita. And Token does, but one would assume that they'd ported the PlayStation 4 version. You'd think it would look reasonable, but no, it looks utterly outdated, and that is a common theme when it comes to Koei Tecmo games. Even Dead or Alive 5, I noted the really terrible texture quality on that. And what is the cherry on top of this cow manure cake that we've been provided? Well, of course, it would be the price tag, a whopping $60 or 50 UK pounds. You have got to be kidding me. That is delusional on the part of Koei Tecmo. Although I guess it isn't. You want to know why I guess it isn't? Because Koei Tecmo has its fan base and they will defend this nonsense to the death. Thousands of people did it for Dynasty Warriors, despite the fact that the PC version is by no means up to scratch, and plenty of people are doing it here as well. 30 FPS is fine, people say. No, it isn't. And this "please sir, can I have some more" attitude amongst some people is ironically anti-consumer, despite the fact that they are the consumers themselves. Please do not let companies like this get away with shoddy ports, especially not at this price. I mean, that I think is really the most insulting thing about it. They're expecting you to pay full AAA price for a game that looks like it was released in 2004, and certainly plays like it was released in 2004, on a PC. No. I mean, it shouldn't have even run this poorly on the PlayStation 4, and it certainly shouldn't run this poorly on a PC. The fact of the matter is, you deserve better as a customer. You do. You really do. You do not have to accept this nonsense. You especially don't have to accept it now that Steam refunds are in play. And if someone comes and defends it and says, oh, you know, it's all fine, then you can call them exactly what they are, a fanboy. I understand liking games from certain companies. I really, genuinely do. I mean, I'm the sort of person that will buy anything that Platinum releases, but if Platinum ported, say, Vanquish to PC and it was locked at 30 frames per second, I would roast them for it. In fact, I would roast them harder for it because I know they can do better. I expect more from a company like that. I don't know why people expect anything from Koei Tecmo. Their history on PC is abysmal. And it looks like they will not be learning any lessons anytime soon if people continue to defend their shoddy ports. Please don't. They are one of the worst right now on Steam, and they deserve criticism for that behavior. My name's been Totalbiscuit. This is Token and Kiwami. Please don't. I'll see you next time.